Fleet Commander Tessara stood on the observation deck of the massive warship called Eternal Serenity and watched the blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. She had conquered 17 worlds in her long career, and this one looked like the easiest target she had ever seen. The natives had barely reached their own moon, and their radio signals were primitive and chaotic. They had no shields and no plasma weapons and no faster-than-light travel. This would be a simple conquest that would add another world to the Volcari Dominion. Her second-in-command, Kethfer, walked up beside her and bowed his long neck in respect. "Commander, we have completed our scans of the planet," he said in his deep voice. "The dominant species calls their world Earth, and they number in the billions, but they have no technology that can threaten our fleet." Tessara made a sound of satisfaction, and her blue scales shimmered in the light of the observation deck. "Excellent," she replied. "Prepare 12 landing teams and send them to establish our first bases. Choose locations away from their major population centers so we can study them before we make our presence known." Kepher hesitated for a moment, and Tessara noticed his 4 eyes were troubled. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "The environmental data is somewhat concerning, Commander," Kethfer admitted. "This world has unusual conditions. The oxygen levels are higher than we prefer, and the gravity is stronger than our home world. There are also extreme temperature variations across the planet." Tessara waved one of her 4 arms in dismissal. "Our soldiers have environmental suits," she said. "They have conquered worlds with worse conditions. Send the teams." Kethfer bowed again and left to carry out her orders. Tessara turned back to watch the planet and felt confident that within a few cycles, this primitive world would belong to the Dominion. She had no idea how wrong she was. The first landing team touched down in a region the humans called the Amazon. It was a vast green area covered in thick vegetation, and the Volcari soldiers thought it would provide good cover while they set up their base. Squad leader Vezek led his team of 20 soldiers through the dense forest and immediately felt uncomfortable. The air was thick and wet, and even through his suit he could feel the oppressive heat. Strange sounds came from every direction, and his sensors detected life forms everywhere he looked. "Stay alert," he ordered his team through their communication devices. "There is significant wildlife in this area." One of his soldiers, named Finn, pointed at a large creature moving through the trees above them. "What is that?" she asked with fear in her voice. Vesik looked up and saw a hairy beast with long arms swinging from branch to branch. It looked at them with small, intelligent eyes, and then screamed at them before disappearing into the green. "Just local fauna," Vesik said, but he felt uneasy. "Keep moving." They walked for another hour, and the problems began almost immediately. First, it was the insects. Tiny flying creatures that somehow got through the seals of their suits and bit their skin. The bites swelled up and burned, and 2 soldiers had to be treated for allergic reactions. Then it was the ground itself. One soldier stepped on what looked like solid earth, but it was actually a thin layer over water, and he sank up to his chest in mud, filled with writhing creatures that tried to enter his suit. Then came the snake. Vesik heard a scream from the back of his group and spun around to see something impossible. A massive serpent as thick as his own body had wrapped itself around one of his soldiers and was squeezing. The soldier fired his plasma weapon, but the snake did not let go. Vesik heard the horrible sound of armor cracking and bones breaking, and then the soldier went limp. "Fire!" Vesik screamed, and his team unleashed their weapons on the serpent. The beast finally died, but so did their comrade, and Vesik stared at the scene in shock. They had been on this planet for less than 2 hours and already lost someone to a local animal. The next 6 hours became a nightmare that Vesik would never forget. They encountered plants that shot poison thorns. They found frogs with skin so toxic that touching one killed a soldier in minutes. They discovered that the water was filled with fish that had teeth like knives and stripped flesh from bone in seconds. They learned that even the beautiful flowers could spray acid that burned through their suits. And then the large predator came. It was a spotted cat bigger than any of them, and it moved through the forest like a ghost. They never saw it until it was too late. It leaped from the darkness and grabbed a soldier by the neck and vanished back into the green before anyone could fire a shot. Vesic tried to call for evacuation, but something was blocking his signal. The thick vegetation and strange atmospheric conditions made communication impossible. By the time night fell, only Vesic and 3 others remained alive from his team of 20. What kind of world is this? One of his surviving soldiers whispered in terror. Vesic had no answer. They huddled together in the darkness and listened to the sounds of the forest. Everything around them seemed to be hunting and killing and eating. This was not a planet that supported life. This was a planet where life was constantly at war with itself. In the morning, a rescue shuttle finally found them, but the other 11 landing teams across the planet had similar stories. Some had encountered massive bears. Some had been attacked by packs of wolves. Some had landed in deserts where the heat alone nearly killed them. Some had landed in frozen wastelands where the cold shut down their equipment. Out of 240 soldiers sent to the surface, only 63 returned alive. Fleet Commander Tessara read the reports with growing horror and called an emergency meeting of her officers. "This is impossible," she said. "We lost nearly 75% of our ground forces to the environment alone. We have not even engaged the native species yet." Our science officer pulled up the environmental data, and his voice was shaking. "Commander, I have reviewed the planetary classification, and I must inform you of something terrible," he said. "According to galactic standards, this world is designated as a Class 12 death world. It is one of the most dangerous habitable planets ever recorded." Tessara felt her blood run cold. "The oxygen levels are nearly toxic to most species," the science officer continued. "The planet has extreme weather, including massive storms and temperature swings. There are active volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis. The local star bombards the surface with radiation, and the life forms have evolved to be incredibly aggressive and deadly." "And the natives?" Tessara asked. "The humans? They live in these conditions?" "They do not just live here, Commander," the science officer said with something like awe in his voice. "They thrive here. They are the apex predators of a world where everything is designed to kill. They have survived ice ages and plagues and mass extinctions. They are the monsters that the other monsters of this world learned to fear." Tessara looked out at the blue planet, and for the first time in her long career she felt true fear. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" she whispered. The Valkyrie had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but they were about to learn a terrible lesson. You do not invade a death world without facing the terrors that evolved there. And the greatest terror of all was the species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a planet that never stopped trying to kill them. The humans did not yet know that aliens had come to their world, but they would find out soon. And when they did, the Valkyrie would discover that conquering Earth was the worst mistake they had ever made. 3 months had passed since the Valkyrie first arrived at Earth, and Fleet Commander Tessara had learned to respect the dangers of this death world. She had adapted her strategy after the disastrous first landing. Her soldiers now wore heavy armored exosuits that protected them from the environment. They used orbital bombardment to clear areas before landing. They established bases in climate-controlled domes that kept out the deadly wildlife. The humans had fought back with surprising ferocity, but their weapons were primitive. Chemical projectiles and explosive devices could not penetrate Valkyrie plasma shields. Their flying machines were shot down easily by the orbiting warships. Their armies were scattered, and their governments had surrendered one by one. Victory seemed complete, and Tissara sent her reports to the High Council with pride. The Death World-designated Earth is now under Dominion control, she had written. The native population has been pacified, and occupation forces are establishing order in all major regions. But Tissara had made a terrible mistake. She had confused surrender with defeat, and she did not understand humans at all. General Kethver now commanded the ground forces, and he was the first to notice that something was wrong. His soldiers were dying in strange ways. Not in battle, but in accidents and incidents that made no sense. A patrol would go out and never return. Their bodies would be found days later with their throats cut. An officer would eat food prepared by human servants and die from poison. A supply convoy would explode without warning. Kepfer called a meeting of his commanders and demanded answers. "How are they doing this?" he roared. "We have orbital surveillance. We have sensors everywhere. How are primitive humans killing our soldiers?" One commander named Ishith stepped forward with a datapad in her trembling hands. "General, I have been studying the humans, and I have learned things that disturb me greatly," she said. "These creatures are not what we thought they were." She activated a holographic display that showed human biology. First, their bodies can repair themselves, YSSETH explained. When we wound them, they do not simply die. Their flesh knits back together over time. They can survive injuries that would kill any Valkyrie instantly. I have seen footage of a human losing an arm and continuing to fight. The commanders made sounds of disbelief, but YSSETH continued. Second, they do not need much sleep. A human can function for days without rest if they consume certain stimulant chemicals. They drink a liquid called coffee that keeps them alert, and they take pills that push their bodies beyond normal limits. They call it running on adrenaline and spite. Third, they eat poison for pleasure. They consume alcohol, which damages their organs. They eat plants that cause pain in their mouths, and they enjoy it. They deliberately seek out dangerous experiences because the fear makes them feel alive. Kepfer stared at her with all four of his eyes wide open. "You are telling me they poison themselves willingly?" he asked. "Yes, General," Ishith confirmed. "And there is more. They bond with predators. They took wolves, which are pack hunting carnivores, and turned them into companions called dogs. These animals are completely loyal to their human masters and can track a scent across hundreds of kilometers. Every time one of our patrols disappears, I believe humans with dogs are hunting them." Another commander spoke up with a shaking voice. "I have witnessed something even worse," he said. "The humans practice something called persistence hunting. Most predators in the galaxy sprint after their prey, and if they fail to catch it quickly, they give up. But humans are different. They do not sprint. They walk and jog at a steady pace, and they simply never stop. I watched footage of human hunters chasing an animal for an entire day. The animal ran and ran until its body overheated, and it collapsed from exhaustion. Then the humans simply walked up to it and killed it. They can chase prey until it literally dies from being pursued." Kepfer felt ice in his veins as he understood what this meant. "They are doing this to us," he whispered. "They are not fighting a war. They are hunting us." The attacks continued and grew worse every day. Humans would strike a base and then retreat. The Valkyrie would chase them and walk right into traps. Explosives buried in the ground. Pits filled with sharpened stakes. Buildings rigged to collapse. The humans knew every centimeter of their world, and they used that knowledge with deadly skill. They attacked at night because human eyes could adjust to darkness. They attacked in rain and storms because they had evolved to function in terrible weather. They attacked in winter because their bodies could generate internal heat, while cold-blooded Valkyrie soldiers became sluggish and slow. And they never stopped. No matter how many the Velkari killed, more humans appeared to take their place. They recruited their elderly and their children. They taught everyone to fight. They turned farmers into soldiers and teachers into spies. Kefir captured a human fighter and tried to interrogate him for information. The human was a small male with gray hair and wrinkled skin. He looked weak and fragile, but he refused to answer any questions. The interrogation droids used pain, but the humans simply laughed. "You think this hurts?" the old human said with blood running down his face. "I grew up on a farm. I have been kicked by horses and bitten by snakes and stung by hornets. I broke my leg once and had to crawl 3 kilometers to get help. Your little machine is nothing." Kefir leaned forward and studied this strange creature. "Why do you resist?" he asked. "Your governments have surrendered. Your armies are destroyed. You cannot win against our technology. Why do you keep fighting?" The human smiled with broken teeth, and his eyes burned with a fire that made Kefir step back. "Because we are human," the old man said. "Because our ancestors survived ice ages and famines and plagues that killed most of our species. Because we climbed down from the trees and looked at the lions and decided that we would be the hunters and not the prey. Because we spread across this entire planet and conquered every environment from frozen poles to burning deserts." He leaned forward despite his chains. "You came here thinking we were primitive, but you do not understand what primitive means. It means we fought our way up from nothing. It means every generation before us struggled and died so that we could live. It means we carry the strength of 1,000 ancestors in our blood." The human laughed again. "You want to conquer Earth? You will have to kill every single one of us. And even then our bones will poison your victory. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not break." He spat blood at Kefir's feet. "We are the children of a death world, and we are just getting started." Kefir ordered the human executed, but the words stayed with him. He filed his report to Fleet Commander Tishara, and for the first time admitted the truth. "We have made a terrible mistake," he wrote. "These humans are not a primitive species waiting to be conquered. They are the survivors of an endless war against their own planet. They have been fighting for their existence since before our ancestors crawled out of the ocean. And they have never lost. I do not know if we can win this war, Commander. I do not know if anyone can win a war against creatures like these." The occupation was beginning to crumble, and the humans were only getting stronger. Commander Ishith had served the Velkari Dominion for 40 years, and she had seen things that would break lesser soldiers. She had fought the hive mind insects of Karath, the seventh, who attacked in swarms of millions. She had battled the silicon beasts of the outer reaches, who could survive in the vacuum of space. She had faced enemies that felt no fear and no pain. But nothing had prepared her for humans. She now commanded the occupation forces in a region the humans called Europe, and winter had come to this part of Earth. The temperature dropped below freezing, and white crystals called snow covered everything. For Velkari soldiers who came from a warm world, this cold was deadly. Their equipment malfunctioned in the freezing temperatures. Their bodies became slow and sluggish as their cold blood struggled to function. They needed heated shelters and warm suits just to survive. But the humans thrived in this frozen nightmare. Ishith watched footage of human soldiers moving through snowstorms with nothing but layers of cloth to protect them. They built fires and heated their food and laughed at conditions that would kill a Velkari in hours. Their bodies somehow generated internal heat, and they could function even when the temperature fell far below freezing. The resistance attacks became worse in winter. Human fighters appeared out of the snow like ghosts. They wore white clothing that made them invisible against the frozen landscape. They struck quickly and vanished before Ishith's forces could respond. They knew every path through the frozen forests and every hiding place in the mountains. One night, a group of humans attacked a Valkyrie supply depot and killed 30 soldiers without losing a single fighter. They melted away into the darkness and left behind only bodies and burning wreckage. Ishith ordered her troops to pursue, but it was hopeless. The humans moved faster in the snow, and they knew how to hide their tracks. They led the Valkyrie patrols into ambushes and traps. They buried explosives under the snow and waited for vehicles to drive over them. They stretched thin wires across paths that cut through armor when soldiers walked into them. Ishith received a report from one of her surviving officers that chilled her more than the winter cold. "Commander, we captured a human communications device, and we have been trying to decode their messages," the officer said. "We discovered something disturbing. They are not using one language. They are using dozens." Ishith did not understand. "Explain," she ordered. The humans apparently developed hundreds of different languages across their world, the officer said with amazement in his voice. "They switch between these languages constantly to confuse our codebreakers. One sentence might be in something called English, and the next in Russian, and the next in Mandarin. Our translation systems cannot keep up." "That is impossible," Ishith said. "No species develops more than one or two languages. It would prevent communication." The humans did, Commander. They developed so many languages that they cannot all understand each other. But somehow they use this as a weapon against us. The resistance grew bolder every day. Humans who looked like peaceful civilians would suddenly produce hidden weapons and attack. Women and elderly, and even children participated in the resistance. Ishith could not tell who was a threat and who was innocent because they all looked the same. They used deception constantly. They created fake communications to mislead Valkyrie forces. They dressed in stolen Valkyrie uniforms to get close to targets. They spread false information through channels they knew were being monitored. One human tactic was particularly terrifying. They would capture Valkyrie soldiers and release them unharmed, but with a message. The message was always the same. "Go back to the stars. This is our world. Leave now or we will make you leave." The released soldiers were supposed to spread fear, and they did. Morale collapsed as stories spread through the occupation forces. Stories of humans who could not be killed. Stories of invisible fighters who appeared from nowhere. Stories of a resistance that never stopped growing. Ishith captured a young human female who had been coordinating attacks in her sector. The female was barely adult by human standards, and she had bright red hair and fierce green eyes. She showed no fear as she was brought before Ishith. "You are responsible for the deaths of many of my soldiers," Ishith said. "How does one so young become such an effective killer?" The human female smiled. "My grandmother fought in a war when she was my age," she said. "Her mother fought in a war before that, and her mother before that. We have been fighting invaders for thousands of years. Every generation passes down the knowledge of how to resist and how to survive." Ishith leaned forward with curiosity. "But you cannot win," she said. "We have ships in orbit that could destroy your cities in minutes. We have weapons that your people cannot match. Why you keep fighting a war you cannot win?" The young human laughed. "You ask why we fight? Let me tell you a story, Commander. There was once a time when my country was invaded by an enemy with better weapons and more soldiers. They conquered our cities and killed our leaders and thought they had won. Her eyes burned with ancient fire. But we did not surrender. We fought them in the fields and in the forests and in the mountains. We made every road dangerous and every night deadly. We attacked and retreated and attacked again until the invaders grew tired and afraid. It took years, but eventually they left." She leaned forward. "That story has happened again and again throughout human history. Empires have risen and conquered us, and every single one has fallen. We outlast our enemies, Commander. We endure what they cannot. We fight until they break. You think you are powerful because you have ships in the sky, but power is not just about weapons. Power is about will. And humans have a will that has been forged in 10,000 years of war and suffering. She smiled. You will leave this world, Commander. Maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow, but eventually you will leave. Because you will grow tired and we never will. You will want to go home and we are already home. You will count the cost and decide it is too high, and we will never stop paying any price for our freedom. Ashitha the human executed, but her words haunted every moment of the long winter nights. Reports came in from across the planet and they all told the same story. The occupation was failing. Every region had active resistance. Valkyrie casualties grew higher every day. Soldiers were terrified and morale was collapsing. Ishith sent a message to Fleet Commander Tisara. Commander, I have fought many enemies in my career, but I have never faced anything like humans. They do not fight like other species. They do not surrender when defeated. They do not fear death. They use their own terrible world against us. I no longer believe we can win this war through occupation. These creatures will never stop fighting. They have been at war since before they built their first cities, and they will be at war until the last one of them is dead. I recommend we consider withdrawal before we lose everything. But Tisara was not ready to admit defeat, not yet. She would learn the hard way that Ishith was right. 1 year had passed since the Valkyrie invasion began, and Fleet Commander Tisara no longer recognized the confident leader she had once been. She stood on the observation deck of Eternal Serenity, but now she looked at Earth with fear instead of arrogance. The blue planet below had become a nightmare that consumed her soldiers and crushed her ambitions. The occupation was collapsing. Every week brought more reports of disasters. Supply convoys destroyed, bases overrun, officers assassinated, entire garrisons vanishing without a trace. The humans had turned their world into a death trap, and the Valkyrie were dying by the thousands. But something even worse was happening now. The humans were no longer just fighting to survive. They were learning and adapting and reaching upward toward the stars. Tisara's science advisor rushed onto the observation deck with terror in his eyes. Commander, we have detected something impossible. He stammered. The humans have built spacecraft. Real spacecraft with plasma engines. Tisara felt her heart stop. That is not possible, she whispered. They did not have that technology when we arrived. They learned it, Commander. They captured our ships and our weapons and they studied them. They took them apart and figured out how they worked. In less than a year, they have reverse-engineered technology that took us centuries to develop. Tisara grabbed the science advisor by his collar. How? She demanded. How could primitives learn so fast? The science advisor trembled. They are not primitives, Commander. I have studied their history, and I understand now. Humans have a trait that no other species we have encountered possesses. They call it curiosity, but it is more than that. They have an obsessive need to understand everything they encounter. Their scientists deliberately expose themselves to danger to gain knowledge. They inject themselves with diseases to study how sickness works. They split atoms knowing the energy could kill millions. They reached their moon not because they needed to, but because they wanted to know if they could. He pulled free from Tisara's grip, and now they want to know how our technology works. They want to reach the stars, and nothing we do will stop them from learning. Tisara watched the display showing human spacecraft launching from hidden bases on Earth. They were crude and ugly compared to Valkyrie vessels, but they worked. They climbed up through the atmosphere and headed toward her orbital fleet. Destroy them, she ordered. Her ships opened fire, but the humans were clever. They used debris and satellites as cover. They flew unpredictable patterns that confused targeting systems. Some of them crashed into Valkyrie ships in deliberate suicide attacks. And they kept coming. Every human ship destroyed meant the humans learned something new about Valkyrie weapons. They adapted and improved and sent more ships. Each wave was harder to stop than the last. Then Tisara received news that made her blood freeze. The humans were not just building ships. They were sending messages across the galaxy. Every species the Valkyrie Dominion had conquered over the centuries was receiving transmissions from Earth. The messages contained weapon designs and tactical information and something else. Something the Valkyrie had never considered. Hope. The humans were telling the conquered species that they did not have to accept Dominion rule. They were showing them how to fight back. They were promising that Earth would help anyone who wanted freedom. Rebellions began spreading across Dominion space. The Krell of Proxima 7 refused to send tribute. The Mavkai of the Outer Reaches destroyed a Valkyrie garrison. The Jalani cut off communication with Dominion command and declared independence. Tisara received a direct transmission from the human resistance leader, and she felt compelled to watch it. The human was a female of middle years with silver scars across her dark face. Her eyes blazed with a fire that seemed to burn through the screen. She wore armor made from salvaged Valkyrie materials, and she spoke with the authority of someone who had won many battles. Fleet Commander Tisara. The human said, "I am General Sarah Chun of the Terran Resistance. I wanted to speak to you directly so you would understand what is happening." Tisara listened in silence. "You came to our world thinking we were weak. You thought our primitive technology made us easy prey. But you did not understand what we are." General Chun stepped closer to the camera. "We are the survivors of a world that never stopped trying to kill us. Every creature on Earth is a winner of an endless war of evolution. Every human alive carries the genes of ancestors who faced extinction and refused to die. You brought your weapons and your ships and your soldiers, and you thought that would be enough. But we have been fighting for our survival since before your species existed. We have faced ice ages and plagues and predators, and we destroyed them all." Her voice grew harder. "And now we face you. And I want you to know something, Commander. We are not just going to drive you from our world. We are going to follow you back to the stars." Tisara felt a chill run through her body. "You conquered other species and made them slaves. You thought the galaxy belonged to you. But those species have heard our message now. They know that the Valkyrie can be beaten. They know that freedom is possible. We are coming, Commander. Not just humans, but everyone you ever conquered. We are going to tear your dominion apart and free every world you ever enslaved." General Chun smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. "You should not have come to Earth. You woke something that should have been left sleeping. You showed us that there are other worlds to explore and other tyrants to fight. You gave us a reason to reach for the stars. Run back to your homeworld, Commander. Warn your High Council. Tell them what you found on the Death World. Tell them the humans are coming." The transmission ended. Tisara stood in silence for a long time. She had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. And instead she had awakened a monster. The humans were not just dangerous. They were a force of nature. They were the children of a world that forged killers, and they were ready to spread across the galaxy. She made her decision. "All ships prepare for withdrawal," she ordered. "We are leaving Earth." Her officers stared at her in shock. "Commander, we cannot abandon the occupation," one of them protested. "The High Council will never accept this." Tisara turned to face them with hollow eyes. "The occupation is already lost," she said. "We are not retreating to save our pride. We are retreating to warn our people. The humans are coming, and the Dominion must prepare. We did not conquer Earth. Earth conquered us. And if we do not act quickly, the same thing will happen to every world in the Dominion. The Volcari fleet began to withdraw from Earth orbit. Below them, the humans watched and celebrated, but they did not stop working. They had tasted victory, but they knew the war was not over. The stars were waiting, and humanity was finally ready to claim them. 15 years had passed since the Volcari first invaded Earth, and the galaxy had changed forever. The Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Nexus Prime were filled with representatives from hundreds of species. They sat in tiered rows that rose toward a massive domed ceiling decorated with stars and planets. This was the center of galactic civilization, where the great powers came to negotiate and make treaties. Today, a new species was being formally admitted to the Council. Ambassador Chen Wei of the Terran Alliance walked to the central podium with calm confidence. She was the daughter of General Sarah Chun, who had led the resistance against the Volcari occupation. Her mother had died 3 years ago, but her legacy lived on in the alliance she had helped create. Chen Wei wore a simple black uniform with the symbol of Earth on her shoulder. She carried no weapons, but everyone in the chamber knew that human warships orbited outside. The Terran Alliance had grown from a single death world to a coalition of 12 star systems in just 15 years. The council speaker was a tall insectoid from a species called the Van. He clicked his mandibles to call for silence. "This session will now come to order," he announced. "We are here to formally recognize the Terran Alliance as a member of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Chen Wei will now address the assembly." Chen Wei looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien species watching her. Some looked at her with fear because they had heard the stories of what humans could do. Some looked at her with gratitude because humans had helped free their worlds from Dominion rule. Some looked at her with curiosity because they wanted to understand these strange Death Worlders. She saw the Volcari delegation sitting in the far corner. Their once proud empire had shrunk to just their home system and a few loyal colonies. They had surrendered 3 years ago after a war that cost them everything. Chen Wei did not feel hatred when she looked at them. She felt something more complicated. The Volcari had brought suffering to Earth, but they had also pushed humanity to reach for the stars. Without their invasion, humans might have remained on their single world for centuries more. She began to speak. "Honored delegates, I bring greetings from Earth and from all the worlds that have joined our alliance. I am honored to stand before you today and speak for my species." Her voice was calm, but it carried across the vast chamber. 15 years ago, the Volcari Dominion invaded our world. They came with warships and weapons and technology that we could not match. They thought we would be easy prey because we had never traveled beyond our own moon. She paused. They were wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Volcari did not understand what they had found on Earth. They did not know that our world was classified as a Class 12 death world. They did not realize that humans had evolved in conditions that would kill most species. They did not expect that we would fight back. She looked at the Volcari delegation. We do not blame them for their mistake. How could they have known? Our own scientists were surprised when we learned how unusual our world is. We grew up thinking that poisonous animals and extreme weather and constant danger were normal. We did not realize that most worlds are gentle and safe. Our voice grew stronger. But we are not here to talk about the past. We are here to talk about the future. And I want to tell you what humanity offers to this galaxy. She took a deep breath. We offer peace. We do not seek conquest. We have never wanted to rule over others. All we ever wanted was to survive and explore and find others like us in the vast darkness between the stars. We offer friendship. Humans have a trait that our allies call pack bonding. We form deep connections with other beings, and we protect those we care about. The species that have joined our alliance have discovered that humans are loyal and trustworthy partners. She gestured to a section of the chamber where representatives from the freed world sat. The Krell and the Mothkai and the Jelani and all the others who suffered under Dominion rule have become our family. We did not free them to create a new empire. We freed them because slavery is wrong and because we remembered what it felt like to fight for our own freedom. Chen Wei's voice softened. We offer help. Human scientists are working with researchers from across the galaxy to solve problems. Human doctors are treating diseases on worlds that never had modern medicine. Human engineers are building infrastructure on planets that were neglected by the Dominion. We are not perfect. We make mistakes. We can be stubborn and aggressive, and sometimes we act before we think. But we try to learn from our errors, and we always try to do what is right. Then her voice changed, and everyone in the chamber felt a chill. But I must also tell you what we will not accept. She looked around the chamber with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient and dangerous. We will not accept the abuse of the innocent. We will not stand by while tyrants enslave peaceful worlds. We will not ignore those who cry out for help. And if anyone threatens our children or our homes or our future, we will respond with everything we have. She looked directly at the various military powers in the chamber. Let me be clear about what that means. We are the survivors of a death world. We evolved alongside predators that could kill with a single bite. We developed our intelligence by learning to turn everything around us into weapons. We conquered our own planet by being more dangerous than anything else that lived there. We do not want war. We hate war. Humans have fought enough wars against each other to know how terrible they are. But if war comes to us, we will not run, and we will not hide, and we will not surrender. Her voice rang out across the chamber. We walked down from the trees and looked at the lions and decided that we would not be prey. We crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts and poisonous swamps. We tamed wolves and horses and elephants. We built cities in places where nothing should survive. We are humanity. We are the children of Earth. We are the monsters that the monsters learned to fear. She lowered her voice, but somehow it carried even further. So I ask you all to remember this. Be our friends, and we will stand beside you against any threat. Be our allies, and we will help you build a better future. Be our family, and we will love you as we love our own. But be our enemies, and you will learn what the Velkari learned. She looked at the former Dominion one last time. You will learn that a death world does not produce victims. It produces survivors. And survivors never give up, and never surrender, and never ever break. The chamber was silent. Then the Krell delegation rose and began to applaud with their 4 hands. The Mothkai spread their wings in a gesture of approval. The Jelani sang a note of respect. One by one, every species in the chamber, except the Velkari, showed their support. Even the Velkari fleet commander Tessara, who had led the original invasion, rose slowly to her feet. She looked at Chen Wei with something like respect in her ancient eyes. The Velkari accept this message, Tessara said. We made a mistake 15 years ago, but we have learned. Humans are not prey. They are something entirely new in this galaxy. She bowed her long neck. We will not forget the lesson of Earth. Chen Wei nodded in acknowledgement. The Terran Alliance was now officially part of galactic civilization. Humanity had earned its place among the stars through blood and sacrifice and unbreakable will. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the souls of every human who had ever lived seemed to whisper their approval. The children of the Death World had finally come home.